right, so we're moving into the senses to finish off the nervous system. So for this first video, we're just going to briefly introduce ourselves to the senses, talk about kind of the overview of the sensory component of the peripheral nervous system, talk about sensation versus perception and some of the components involved in sensation, and then kind of just talk about what general versus special senses are. So this one will be relatively short. So remember that the sensory pathways are divided into two sides, or two pathways, the somatic and the autonomic. The somatic side is going to provide the central nervous system with information from the skin and the skeletal muscles, which primarily means we're getting information about the external environment. Whereas the autonomic side is providing the central nervous system with information from glands, cardiac, smooth muscle, right? Which means the autonomic side is primarily bringing internal information in from the internal environment, right? So while like those are not 100%, right, that's kind of the good distinction to make with somatic versus autonomic, right? The main thing is what they innervate, skin and skeletal muscle versus glands and smooth muscle and whatnot, but it also is divided somewhat based on external versus internal environment in terms of what they're detecting. So now we get to these two terms. I mentioned sensation and perception, and I've talked about those maybe a little bit at this point, but we've been using these terms often, and so sensation is really just the awareness that there is some sort of stimulus, right, either coming from the external environment or from the internal environment inside the body, right? You don't necessarily have a conscious awareness of this, right? This is just your body is aware, right? So whether it be something you're cognitively or consciously aware of, or something that you are subconsciously aware of, or not consciously aware of at all, right? The big thing is that your body has detected and is understanding or is aware of some sort of change or stimulus that has occurred. Perception is probably what you're thinking when you think sensation. Perception is your conscious interpretation of those sensations. Right, and usually we're looking at the somatosensory region of the cerebral cortex, which we find in the parietal lobe. So perception is you're consciously aware, you're actually like right now aware that there's some sort of sensation, some sort of stimulus that has occurred. Right, so these terms are very similar, but technically different, and we want to understand those differences. Sensation is your body's awareness, right, that there has been some sort of stimulus. Perception is your conscious awareness of some sort of stimulation or some sort of change. So what do we need for sensation to occur? What are the things that we absolutely need for this? One is you need stimulation of a sensory receptor. The receptor has to be triggered, right, by something. It has to pick up something in the environment, some sort of change, something. From there, the stimulus is going to be transduced into a graded potential by a sensory receptor. Remember, graded potentials, right, can be weak or strong. Remember that the action potential is like it's either on or off as an action potential, but graded, right, can be weak, strong, right, something like that. Then we have, if the sensory neuron is triggered, then we have conduction of an action potential by that sensory neuron, which then carries that signal to the central nervous system for integration, where we can translate that into a sensation and potentially a perception of that original stimulus, right? So these are all the things that are needed to detect a sensation. And we have a couple different types of senses. We have general senses and special senses. General senses we for the most part associate with the skin and muscles, although it does extend beyond just that. So the ones that we probably already think of are things like pressure and touch and vibration, temperature, pain, body position, but it also includes some chemical detection, stretch, and nausea. Whereas special senses are what you probably think of when you think of sense. Your sense of smell, your sense of taste, your sense of vision, hearing, and equilibrium or balance. Right? So special senses usually have some sort of special body part that is associated with it. So like with smell, you have the nose. With taste, you have the tongue. Vision, eyes, hearing, and equilibrium both involve the inner ear, whereas general senses tend to be more generalized in terms of where they're found. So you have receptors for pressure and touch and vibration all throughout your skin, right? You have proprioceptors to detect your body's position at any given moment throughout, right? So those are more general in comparison. We don't have a special organ that is only for detecting that specific sense when we look at the general senses.